Hi, Andy. It's great to be talking to you today. And you're looking very bright there. Beautiful. So, um, I know you went to the London School of Theology for some summer seasons. You and your wife went. And I'm interested in that because I've read some Alistair McGrath books, and I know he's a very good theologian. So, could you tell me a little bit about your time there, Andy? You studied some manuscripts. Tell me about that, please.
That's right. What I did, Paul, was something called the reduced BA in theology. Very, very reduced from 3 years to about 3 days. So, what you can do in those 3 days, under good supervision and teaching by a guy called Dr. Conrad Gempf. Um, he is a well-known theologian and popular works that he's written. But he was just trying to give us a taste of what it might be like to put our toe in the water of the theological sea. And we were challenged towards the end of these 3 days just to put some photocopied manuscripts of original texts that he had done for us on the floor and try and put them together like a jigsaw, but in date order. And that would have helped us if we'd have persevered through a proper BA to realise that the Bible structure was made to fit together, and we could see that people were who were used by God to write those documents were actually prophesying, were actually ahead of themselves, if you like, because of the hand of God. Um, but just to get back to the nuts and bolts and see how it's made. It's quite scary, and I didn't take it any further.
Of course, someone has to do that work. Although we lose the spirit, it's more about the letter of the law than the spirit of the law. And I guess as Christians, we are interested in the spirit of the law, but somebody has to put all those letters together, don't they? A bit like a jigsaw, someone has to do it. And I know that you are quite keen on some of the modern translations, Andy. For instance, Rob Lacey, who died some 20 years ago now, he wrote a translation of the scriptures, and I know you're quite interested in that. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Having met Rob once or twice, he was a performer and a mime artist, as well as a very creative writer. Having met him, and he took a personal interest in our paths as Christian folk who had vocations in nursing and teaching, and really, really, really encouraging. And then read some of his stuff, which just jumps off the page. In the turn of the century, just the beginning of the 21st century, he was writing before he died. And to actually get um, a summary of the Bible in vernacular language, a bit like street language, he called it, that people might find very odd in a church setting, but was able to touch people on a raw and a sort of earthy level, that Jesus actually walked on dusty roads and he became thirsty. And he did tell people the truth, and it wasn't easy for them to hear. And the way that Rob was able to almost make a theatre show out of a book very much appealed to me.
And of course, I understand that Salt Mine Theatre Company are going to take Rob's translation on the road as a stage performance. Is that correct?
So yeah, that's for the Soul Mine Company. One of their main ways of working for the Lord is to put on shows around the country, particularly in schools, churches. And this show is a new show for them after 20 years. Whether the language is quite the same as it was 20 years ago, I'm not sure, but they have um, been able to make a theatre performance out of the book, the Liberator, and the Street Bible, the two books there that Rob put together, um, to bring people into a living experience of the Bible. Um, and of course, his whole aim, as I'm sure the theatre company's aim would be to get people to read a Bible that was complete and wasn't dramatizing and wasn't um, making it more interesting for people who don't understand or have read the Bible too much, was another way he put it. This will jump at you if you think you've already read the Bible, but also, obviously, if you've never read the Bible, maybe start with this. So it was almost like a pre-evangelism, a way of kicking off someone with some interest in, well, how is the Bible relevant to me? Well, come and see the show. So I would make every effort myself to get to see that show. Is coming up this autumn in the UK.
Okay, so it's good to know that Rob's work is continuing. Some authors, their works do better after they have gone to be with the Lord than while they were on earth. C.S. Lewis's books are still selling really well. They're almost in public domain now. I think it's almost 70 years since some of them were in, so they'll be free soon, and you just copy them off the internet.
70 years is not very long, for.
No, it's not. That's true, isn't it?
When you look back.
I know. Do you? I know we sometimes think of, say, Henry VIII. Oh, that was a long time ago. That was the 1500s. But if you think about, well, it was my granddad's granddad's granddad, then it doesn't seem so long ago.
Well, it's scary, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, as we get older, we realize that actually 60 or 70 years, it's it's not that long, because you can go back. I mean, my dad is not 91, and
Wow.
he's still preaching.
Praise God.
And
yeah.
and he can go back, almost he's getting close to 100 years, and remember what it was like then.
Yeah.
So when we think back about, say, Christ was 2000 years ago when he walked on earth, then if we look at it in that way, it's not too long ago. And of course, we know with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years a day. So we get a kind of little bit of a perspective there on eternity and the way that the Lord views space and time. So that's interesting, isn't it?
I love that big picture, and I think all the time that I've not been to Bible college, I've not become a minister, I've not devoted myself to getting to grips with some of the issues that have bothered me at a deep level. I know so many books, there's so many courses, so much online, that there is no excuse for me now. And with the Fellowship of Living Stones and the teaching that you yourself and Jeannie and many others bring to us, we can again put our toes in the water, and we're safe. We're not going to drown, because we've got a guide. We've got a hand to hold, and I think that's the purpose of a Bible college, that you have a company of believers and you have mentors who are absolutely modeling what they teach, hopefully, and that cannot be anything but good. So it's like going to church every day, I would imagine. And that was the lovely thing about LST, that it all started with worship. My interest was in the music, particularly. It speaks to me of my learning style and my resistance to being taught, and you don't have opportunity unless you're one-to-one and mentored like that, which you would be at a Bible college, to grow and to accept that some things you can do and some you can't, and some you prefer, but you shouldn't just leave out other aspects of ministry. I tried a little bit of counselling because it was something I've been able to do informally in my work setting as a nurse. And when the academic rigor became clear, I knew I was in for something that I needed to be called for. I don't feel called for that, but I did feel called to help worship. So
Okay. Okay.
many other people have, as well as people at LST, have been wonderfully helpful in that regard.
Moving on to back at the London School of Theology, you looked at how music fits into worship. And of course, having a teachable spirit, as you mentioned earlier, being willing to be taught is important, because it's not helpful to any of us if we've got this pride, this unwillingness to be taught. I will do it my way, and that's it. Unless we have that willingness to be taught. And that in itself, I guess, is a kind of sacrifice of praise to the Lord. So when you play music, Andy, and the way you learned the LST about worship, how did you put those lessons into practice regarding leading worship?
Their whole purpose is if Jesus was leading music, Jesus was leading the worship, how would he do it? How would you speak to him? So there's a little bit of engagement with prayer there, that you're approaching worship as prayer. You're making sure that your musicianship is the best it possibly can be, but also you're stepping into your right place, that you're not pushing yourself into I must be a worship leader now, I've done this course. No, I'm still not a worship leader, but I am able to appreciate how worship leaders are working and to work with them. So I think that's what I've really got from being at a high level, albeit as a real basic starter.
That's an interesting concept, Andy, about Jesus and worship, because we know when the disciples and Jesus were in the upper room, they sang a hymn before they went out to the Garden of Gethsemane. So that tells us that music does have an important place, because it stirs our hearts. Sometimes you get people come to church of a Sunday morning and they've got their minds elsewhere. They're wondering about all the things they did that week and any problems. And, they just happened to be in church at that time. But when the worship band play and there's an anointing on that music, suddenly it can all change in their hearts. And that's what true worship is. It's having our heart in the right place. And of course, you can play really well, but if your heart's not there, it doesn't count to the Lord. And somebody who can't play very well, if their heart's, well, Lord, I've only got one talent, but I'm not burying it. I'm using it for you, Lord. Then that surely is a greater worship than somebody who could play really well.
Hope so. Yeah, that's the encouragement. And the difference between performing your best for the Lord and giving your all in worship, those two things are there. And it's a place like the LST worship course, which I will plug a little bit if I may, but it's a place where you can resolve and discover yourself in those issues.
Now, Andy, I understand that you also have been doing some teaching. You've been running a course, and I think you've run it twice now on bereavement.
Yeah.
So do you find that your own teaching skills there have been honed a little bit by your studies elsewhere?
That's right. Listening in the group situation is probably a teacher's key weapon. If you're not listening, especially when you're sharing your own personal experience of bereavement, which was our meeting point, then you're not starting, because listening skills, like teaching, in a way can't be taught, which sounds odd. You grow them and you learn them. So having an opportunity just to sit with folk, and when there's a silence, that's not always a bad thing, but knowing how to move forward in that silence is another growth point. Yeah, so that's been good to get some confidence in that too.
Yes, and it's good that you are able to share. I know on Living Stones you sometimes share on the Zoom meeting, and you always have something valuable to offer, and we're so glad about that. And that's part of what Living Stones is. It's all the people involved have something, however small, that they can share, and each one is valuable, because sometimes you think about a little diamond, it's only small, but it's very valuable, and you don't want to lose it. So what everyone brings is important.
Yeah, I was thinking just yesterday in chat with someone about the grit in the oyster brings the pearl.
Oh, yes.
And that's a common way of thinking about endurance and perseverance and struggles, and just the way that if you're going to learn something, if you're going to be taught, and we are talking about college and Bible school and growing, it's not always plain sailing, it's not always comfortable. I remember when we mentioned earlier that my wife Denise, who was a teacher in special needs education, when she was doing some of her studies, they talked about her mind being stretched. And she thought, oh no, that sounds terrible. So it's like a gym or a workout. And there is work to do. We worship God with our bodies, our hearts, our souls, our spirits, with our minds.
Okay. Yes, we do. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Yeah, good point, Andy. Yeah, you today. Thank you for sharing with us. We do appreciate it. So yeah, continue to move forward.